are quorate, all members are in attendance. So welcome to this meeting of the SPA Resources Committee. Should I drop off the call, Alistair, would you be willing to take over chair till I get reconnected, please? Thank you.
I will do.
Particular welcome to colleagues from Police Scotland, the Scottish Government, HMICS and the SPA, and a special warm welcome to Sarah Roughhead, who's the new Chief Financial Officer, who's started in the last few weeks and will obviously be a regular attendee at the Resources Committee. We're looking forward to working with you, Sarah. Just a wee reminder to people that members have read all the papers, so you don't need to repeat them. Please keep your introductory remarks to the key points and any particular issues that you want us to discuss or be aware of. So with that, we'll move on to 1.2. No apologies have been received for today. 1.3, any members wish to declare any interests or connections? No, thank you. 1.4, decisions on taking business in private. In accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders and the reasons outlined in the private papers, I would invite members to agree to taking items 6 through to 10 in private. Agreed? Thank you. And 1.5, there's been no decisions taken since we last met as a committee. So moving on to section 2 then, the minute of our previous meeting has been circulated. That was the minute of the 13th of August. Are members content to agree those minutes as an accurate record? Yes, thank you very much. 2.2, we've got the action log and matters arising. We have one item that is proposed as ongoing, and we can pick that up further when we get on to the agenda item 4.1, transformation and benefits report. Are people content with the status of the rest of the actions? Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Moving on then to the substantive items for today, and 3.1 is the Q2 financial monitoring report, and over to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. So, yeah, the Q2 finance report covers the period up until the end of September. So I'll just focus on the dashboards as usual, just to pull out some of the sort of key messaging around the Q2, accepting your comments, Chair, that the report's taken as read, but just some key things to point out. So overall, at the end of Q2, on a year-to-date basis, we are showing an overspend with regards towards our Q1 forecast. So that's shown as 4.5 million over. That is really just a timing difference. At the point of the Q1 forecast, the pay award wasn't agreed. It was still, discussions were largely unknown, and since then the pay award has been agreed, the backdated payments have been made, etc. So we are seeing that overspend on a year-to-date position, but it has all been taken account of in the revised Q2 revised forecast. So that's probably the key thing for that, just to call out that as being that timing difference. So just in terms of the Q2 forecast overall, it is a forecast break-even position in line with our funding. We have received additional funding from Scottish Government to part fund the additional pay award costs, and we had the commitment alongside that to identify some one-off savings in the budget to fund the rest of that. So that's all been taken account of in terms of showing that break-even position. Just in addition to that, you know, page 4 of the report does show some of the other challenges within the Q2 forecast. So it is a challenging position that we will continue to monitor as we move through the financial year, but we are seeing increasing costs around like ill health, you know, catching up with backlogs, etc. We are seeing additional overtime, you know, additional legal costs. So that's all been built into the forecast as well, offset with some other underspends in the budget around things like police staff, where we're running slightly below budgeted assumptions, one-off revenue and some other non-pay movements. So like I say, overall balanced break-even position, which we will continue to monitor. The main outstanding part for the forecast outturn is the impact of the inflation guarantee that was part of the pay award. We don't know what that will be yet. We won't know that until mid-January, until December. CPI numbers are published. So again, we are mindful of that. We have noted it as a risk or a threat within the budget report itself, and discussions are ongoing with government around what that could potentially look like, how that would be funded, etc. So that is the one key outstanding thing for Q2 forecast, but we'll catch that up as we move through the remainder of the year. And then finally, just in terms of revenue, the estimated costs associated with the presidential and vice presidential visit are quoted. They are just for completeness, and we will discuss that in more detail in the private session. So that's overall in revenue. Just in terms of capital and reform, page 10 of the report summarises the position. So in terms of capital, we are seeing that deliverability move from amber towards green. We are seeing increasing spend, like it's significantly increased from the same point last financial year. We're seeing the commitments increasing month on month, and we had a really good high spend in period 6, around £9 million. So that has taken us ahead of our forecast at the end of September, which is good news in terms of capital delivery, because it means things are progressing. And again, forecast break-even position overall. The forecast still does require a bit of slippage to be achieved across the financial year, around £6 million. So again, we're working closely with the business areas around that and taking decisions through things like capital investment group, etc., to monitor that. The main movements in the forecast have been some reallocations to fleet, so you will see that as a forecast overspend, but that's approved in terms of additional purchases, and there are some underspends coming through in the change space, and that's things around, there's been some slippage in some of the timelines. Some of the costs have actually transferred to reform as opposed to capital, as we see more and more digital costs transferring, and some of the confirmed costs have come in lower than the original business case, which is a price difference rather than impact on service. So that's all built in to the forecast there. And then finally, reform. So reform is slightly behind the Q1 forecast, but again, forecast break-even position for the year. We have changed deliverability of reform to amber just because there are still some risks in the forecast, and the commitments, there's still a number of commitments to be made later on in the financial year. So that has been changed to amber, but that will get taken in the rounds of the overall revenue position, and we will continue to monitor reform and revenue as a collective, as one revenue budget. And then the only other aspect of the Q2 report is Appendix B, which is the additional funding that I mentioned from Scottish Government for pay award, and we are just looking for approval for that to add that to the budgets, which is reflected in the Q2 report. So thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Lynn, many thanks. Really helpful introduction as always. Colleagues, I'll open it up, and if we can maybe start with any issues or questions on the revenue position and forecast. Alistair.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks as usual for the report, Lynn. Very helpful, and you've actually touched on a number of the areas that I had questions on. So I know we're going to discuss this one later on the agenda, but just in relation to the Vice President and presidential visits, this is a significant amount of money. So when are you expecting clarity on whether you'll receive this or not, and what mitigations are you putting in place? That was the first question. Do you want me to go through them all? Do you want to go through that one first, Lynn?
Don't mind. Happy if you want to.
Okay, so I'll just go through them. So my next question then was you touched on this as well, was in relation to the inflation guarantee payment of 1%. Obviously, a 1% pay increase equates to £12.5 million on the budget. So again, you're right to flag this as a significant risk. So my question again, you mentioned that you've got ongoing conversations with Scottish Government, but are there other mitigations being put in place around this? My third question was in relation to the ill health, which is flagging up at the moment at a £2.5 million overspend. And I know that there's been considerable work done, to address the issues around ill health, retirement. It's a very difficult and stressful time for anybody that's in such a process. But going forward, do you think you will address the backlog, and will this return to? I know it's not exactly the same every year, but will it return to more normal levels, which will, of course, then help with the budget forecasting? And then my final question was in relation to the not making use of the VER, £3.8 million this year. So may have been covered in People Committee, but what was the rationale for not making use of that this year as a tool to right-size the organisation?
Thank you. So I can certainly come in on a number of points around the finance position, and others may want to come in from an operational perspective. But if I just take them just in the order that you raised them. So in terms of the presidential and vice presidential visit, yes, there are various conversations ongoing at the minute around the funding for that, and we work with Scottish Government around their spring budget revision, which is essentially our budget getting adjusted in year. So our expectation would be that we would receive the additional funding through the spring budget revisions. Like I say, those discussions are still ongoing, and we are due to write back to Government today just around an updated position on that. So that dialogue is continuing, and Government are being kept up to date in terms of where the costs are. Just in terms of where we're at today, it's not hugely different from what's presented in the report, and that was broadly in line with the estimates that we provided back in July, August time. So there should be no surprises in there. There's a bit of movements, but overall broadly in line with what's previously been communicated to Government. So our expectation would be through spring budget revision we would get that funding. In terms of the inflation guarantee, so yeah, significant. Any movements in pay award has a significant financial pressure, just given the size of the workforce. So inflation is tracking higher at the minute. We're still around that 3.8, and as you know, the inflation guarantee will be based on the average CPI between January and December. So we won't have the final position until that December CPI is published in mid-January. So again, working closely with that, working closely with Government around the cash impact of that, the budgetary impact, and how that will be dealt with, because at the time of the pay award discussions, we committed to funding some of the in-year, like the 4%, taking the pay award to 4%. We confirmed to fund some of that through some of the one-off benefits like the VR that you mentioned that I can come on to, but we were very clear we were pushing our affordability at that level. So anything in addition, it was, it would be really difficult to take from our budget, given that it is mainly committed costs. So as I say, continuing that conversation with Government, we're trying to understand, will it be a late spring budget, budget revision, or how Scottish Government will deal with that. So overall, still to be confirmed, but definitely on the radar in terms of keeping that at the forefront. In terms of ill health, yeah, we are seeing some additional costs coming through there, just in terms of that, addressing that backlog and the pipeline around that. Any of the discussions I've been kind of involved in from a financial perspective is I think we'll probably still see some pressure going into next financial year before it might taper off to a more general level, if you like. But again, happy if anybody wants to come in around the operational impact of that. But certainly from the budget and the financial planning aspect, that's our assumption at the minute. And then finally, VER. So we had ring-fenced some money there, and it was as a result of the reduced pension contributions for staff. There was the 3-year benefits around that. So we had ring-fenced that for VR. It's not that there hasn't been any VER. There has been. It's just this is the balance that was left of that superannuation, and we knew fairly early on that would probably help to support the pay award costs, because in terms of the activity undertaken and what we had essentially in that pot for VR. So and again, but taking your point about reshaping the organisation, that's obviously getting looked at in the rounds overall in terms of workforce modernisation, the pressure in the service, and taking that all of that into account. But essentially, that is what helps support us fund the additional money associated with the pay award.
Chair, that's very helpful. Thank you, Lynn. Could I just go back to these big financial risks around, the US presidential visits, around the inflation guarantee payment? Appreciate that ongoing conversation with Scottish Government, and there's no surprises in any of this. But is there any other mitigations that Police Scotland are thinking about or attempting to put in place at the moment, should those conversations with the Scottish Government, and we hope they're successful, but if they're not, then what's your thoughts around that?
So I think overall, again, the costs are so significant, they just simply can't be absorbed within our budget. And we were very clear with the Scottish Government, from the outset around that. And, the accountable officer had written to Scottish Government on that basis, 20 million plus costs just can't be absorbed in an in-year budget. So, what that will mean should we not get the funding will be subject to further conversations. As I say, our expectation is that they would be funded, but I totally appreciate your point that that's not confirmed yet, but it simply couldn't in the rounds be absorbed within our policing budget.
Yeah, that's very clear.
Spears, I think, wants to come in. Is it on that point?
Yeah, I was just making a comment, Chair, on that point, Alistair. So again, just to give yourself and board members that level of assurance, we've had a number of conversations with the officials within government, but equally with the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Finance, and we've clearly articulated our position. We know that there are conversations between Scottish Government and UK Government. So we've certainly very strongly advocated our position, and Lynn's advocated in that space, and there's certainly nothing that would suggest to us that funding wouldn't be provided. So I guess Lynn's right, our absorbability in that space is probably impossible, but you just need to be assured that we've certainly been in a number of conversations with government around the costs.
Thank you, Chair. That's very, very clear. Appreciate the answers.
Thanks, Alistair. Tom.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the report, Lynn. My question's around legal liability. So some of the answers may, in fact, come from the professional area, the DCC Spears as well, in terms of the answers. It shows in the report under that area of business a £2 million overspend against the budget. So the question is around, is that all about actual claims, or does that include the costs of external representation of the organisation in dealing with those claims? Is there anything that is striking out of the one-off costs that are causing this, or is this a general trend? And in terms of being able to pull that back in the future, is there an ability to look at the money's been spent? A claim's a claim. You have to deal with that, but we have to make the choice about who represents us. So costs incurred in bringing in external legal representation, is that an area that can efficiencies be made, and that we have internal representation as well? And the other thing is, clearly, I know it will be referred to the legal committee, but the learning from these claims to be preventative in terms of them recurring.
Thanks, Tom. I see DCC Smith. It's got DCC Spears. Sorry, he's got a hand up. Do you want to come in first before Lynn comes in?
Yeah, just a couple of general comments. Obviously, legal services sits under my own portfolio. So I think, firstly, Tom, to give you a little bit of assurance, there's a couple of different budget strands. One around legal provision and external legal support, which we use on a case-by-case basis. And obviously, we operate within the budget that's provided for that. Separate to that, then there's probably the matter around liability, and I think what I would be confident is that we forecast ahead, and at times we will forecast based on maybe worst case scenarios. In some instances, I think finance have been really good at looking at what lies ahead. And probably the final point I would maybe make, and I've spoken to Sarah in her role as new CFO, that I would really like her with a fresh pair of eyes to have a really close look at the provision of legal inside the organisation, and is there a way and a shape in which we can be more efficient than we currently are. You will be aware that over the last few years we've uplifted the provision of internal legal services, and in part that was to reduce the number of instances where we would buy in additional legal support. So Sarah's going to do that in the coming months, but I think I'm confident that where we do spend in the legal space, it's set against the budget that we've put in place for that.
Tom, are you content with that?
Are we in effect saying then that this is showing an overspend of £2 million, but we expect that to come in at less than that because it's a worst case scenario?
Lynn?
So yeah, so the forecast is the Deputy Finance works closely with legal around that, looking at the legal registers, etc., and looks at cases that are ongoing on a probability basis, and we'll build that into the forecast. But we always have that risk or threat in our budget report because it is such a demand-led and variable error. So, like, you know, the outcome probably won't be exactly what we've got there in the forecast because it changes, and it's just by the nature of that spend. So like I say, the forecast is based on the assessment of what's in the pipeline and based on a level of probability, but it will likely move by the time we get to year end. But that's why we have our monthly monitoring, and so that if there are pressures coming through, that we can identify mitigating actions so that it is within the overall budget, or if there's any if it does come in less than anticipated, as you say, if this is a worst case scenario, so that we're taking those mitigating actions. Because the key point is we're trying to manage the whole budget, and there's just elements of that, whether it's ill health, whether it's like legal liabilities. They are so variable and demand led that we just need to keep a close kind of eye on that in terms of the context of the overall budget and how we can put mitigating actions in as appropriate.
Thanks very much, Lynn and DCC Spears. Angela.
Pauline, my question is on reform, not revenue. So just before we move on to that, is that okay, or do you want to finish off revenue?
If you don't mind, I'll just quickly finish off revenue. A couple of areas from myself. Starting with the staffing profile, which is set out in the slides, obviously both for officers and staff, headcount is lower than the budgeted assumptions. So I'm particularly interested in the impact of that financially for both officers and staff, and how we're mitigating those impacts. And also, I noticed that there's a 400k underspend predicted for SPA, and what that relates to and whether that's recurring too. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I can come in with a couple of aspects around the budget. So when it comes to the police officer budget is based on a peak establishment of around 16,500 officers. That's what the budget was based on. So that will be the high point at any time in terms of our probationer intakes. In terms of the numbers that are published in here, this is the quarterly numbers that the Scottish Government publish. So it's just aligning the timing with the intake. They don't quite hit the financial quarters, if that makes sense. So in terms of a policing perspective, and in terms of police officer budget, it is in line with budget establishment. It's just that it's the ebbs and flows, because we all have our intake, but we lose each day, each week, through attrition, and it sort of is almost like a zigzag pattern if you look at it plotted along. So we are just seeing that, but in terms of when those intakes are taken in, that will put the numbers back up to the 16.5, and then that's the sort of continuous cycle in terms of probationary intakes matching attrition. In terms of the police staff budget, yes, we're running below budgeted assumptions there, and that is kind of overall, it's a lot of the workforce modernisation posts that were approved in terms of, trying to release officers to the front line, and it's just been the recruitment pipeline bringing those in that's maybe not been as quick as was initially anticipated when the budget was set. So again, looking at that through the forecasting lens and rebaselining that overall, but essentially that was the main reason why we're running behind the budgeting assumption, is that we were onboarding those additional staff through the year.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And John, are you going to come in the SPA budget position?
Yes, I will. Thank you. As you say, the majority of the underspend in SPA corporate is all to do with our police staff. We've been under establishment by 4 to 6 FTE for the year, and we've deliberately taken the decision not to recruit, to just pause recruitment for the minute, because we're going through a restructure of the SPA corporate establishment. So we've decided to pause that until we've got our revised structure in place. We expect that to happen in the new year. We're going through JNCC process at the minute, and then once that's been agreed, we'd look to recruit again. In terms of your other aspect about impact, we've reported to RAC just last week on our performance, so it's a little bit lower than we would normally expect. 72% of our business plan milestones have been achieved, so nearly a third, 28%, are being reprofiled. And what we're doing just now is looking at the milestones where there is a risk that we won't deliver in year, to see where we can reallocate resources potentially, and also just accept that there are some milestones that we won't achieve this year and potentially move them into the following year.
Thanks very much for clarifying, John. Thank you. So, Angela, moving into the reform aspect, over to yourself, please.
Thank you. Sorry, I'll just papers back up. It was really in relation to the changes that are noted in this report, and that it's going from green to an amber rating. So I just was looking for some assurance on the change to the spend over the period from Q1 to Q2. 5.2%, 25% of the budget is yet to be committed. So I just wondered what actions were being taken to get that back on track, or what the implications were further down the line. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and again, I can come in with the financial perspective, but I don't know if the director may want to come in with some of the change activity itself. But yeah, so the key thing for reform is a lot of that is a resource cost. So we do see that cost month on month in terms of, that's a consistent spend, but a lot of it is the non-pay elements associated with some of the programmes. So yeah, quite right to point out that the commitments, there is still a number of commitments to be made in the final part of the financial year, and you can see that also from the profile on the dashboard as well. And I suppose that's one of the main reasons why we've moved it to amber at the minute, because those commitments still have to be made, and there are still some risks in the forecast. But again, we again work closely with the transformation with our change colleagues around any levers or any reallocations that we can do. But essentially the key thing for me on reform is Scottish Government treat that as one revenue budget. So we finance would consider that in the collective in terms of managing the overall financial position. So it's just for us how we keep close to change in terms of how that position will move. The budget was with a quite significant element of slippage in the budget at the start of the financial year. That has now been achieved, so any further slippage would put that into an underspend position. So it is that ongoing activity and work to monitor that and mitigate it and reallocate where appropriate. But hopefully that answers from a financial perspective, but certainly happy to take any more questions.
JCC Smith, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it was just to give some assurance really on the scrutiny around that. I suppose from the perspective in terms of non-committed spend, we hold monthly meetings around where we've got slippage, where we expect spend to come. We've also started to do quite a bit of work on having projects and programs that we can commit to that are perhaps shorter term, quick hits in terms of bringing spend forward in that particular area. It's always a challenge for us, Angela, just making sure that we keep an eye on that. I'm really confident with the scrutiny that we have. Breeder and the team do a lot of work around managing that weekly, daily in some cases as well, just to make sure that we're on top of it. So although the position looks, you know, kind of in terms of 25% still to be committed, I'm confident we will achieve that. I think also the slippage that we've managed to work through is quite substantial, and I'm really pleased with the efforts of the team in relation to that. You know, we were very overcommitted, so I think kind of when you look at those two in the round and you balance them together, I'm quite confident that we'll manage the spend moving forward. And actually having it as a separate budget sometimes is not unhelpful, but actually kind of I try and look at it across the piece as opposed to a separate pot. Completely, we report on that around transformation activity, which is absolutely right and proper. But I think just to give you some assurance, you know, we are on top of it and we are keeping track of it. And I think you'll see this kind of ebb and flow as we move through the budget cycle, but confident that we've got the ability to keep track of it at my level and with Breeder and the team as well.
Thank you. There is the next agenda item, obviously, is on the wider transformation. So there's a few points there, but thanks to both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Moving on to, sorry, Tom, did you want to come in and reform?
No, I thought capital was coming in. Are you going to that now? Oh, right.
Yes,
okay.
it is. So on you go. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed. In the capital report, the overspend was offset by capital receipts being higher than expected, and I understand the inability to take those receipts and retain them for a specific purpose, but that becomes significant when we start to get capital receipts in terms of estates in the future. So there's something about just being clear on what is possible there. But when you look at those capital receipts being used in the way they are, then you lose the ability to ring fence up for future spend. But part of the estates transformation master plan is about offsetting some of the costs of capital receipts. What sort of risk does that pose to us going forward, and how do we mitigate that?
So thanks for the question. So yeah, this has been a kind of topic of conversation, you know, quite a lot, and it basically comes down to the minute around the annual funding settlements and the risks that presents, not just from a capital receipts perspective, but from an overall capital long-term planning perspective. So in terms of the level of capital receipts we're seeing at the minute, between maybe 1 and 3 million, that is manageable in year. It helps support our capital programme each year, but you're quite right, we're not storing them up for the future big transformational spend because we don't have that ability to hold reserves to do that. So that's one aspect of it. But I think the bigger risk is, as you say, is once we get into real estate's transformation, delivery of the master plan, where we may see some real big capital receipts. It's our ability to manage that in year is risky because we don't have that flexibility. So we touched on it at the committee, the Criminal Justice Committee, that the chief was at a couple of weeks ago, the chief in the DEP, just around the lack of flexibility to allow that longer term planning. We have also written to the Scottish Government to continue that dialogue, like how can the Scottish Government help support some of this, you know, not just capital receipts, but some of the other flexibility around them, funding models, etc. So yeah, the dialogue is ongoing and we are kind of pushing into that. But yeah, the real risk is going forward when we start to see some of those more significant capital receipts and our inability to manage them with an annual funding settlement.
Donna, welcome to you. Did you want to come in on that too?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Chair. Just to add to that, it's within our gift when we control these other assets come on to become available on the market for sale, so that we can align those with where we are in our pipeline of delivery, so that we then actually optimise when we're bringing it to the market and when sales are due to complete, so that we should have them settling at the start of a financial year, and then they should be able to allocate that to spending in the 12 months ahead. The annualised settlement really doesn't help us, but there are ways that we can work around that if we work smartly with it.
Thanks both. Tom?
Thanks, Donna. With the experience we've had of bringing property to the market is it's very difficult to land it in 1 year. I'm sure you understand that. But the master plan outline in the business case, etc., showed these receipts as being part of the funding for the overall picture. So is that risk recognised in that business case going forward?
I'm sorry, was that to me?
Yeah, I think so. And I think Sarah's also got her hand up, so you could maybe say something in terms of, we'll go on to this later in terms of estates master plan and MP3, but if you maybe want to give a kind of
it will be something
just now, Dawn, and then we'll hand over to Sarah. Thanks.
Sure, thank you. So it will be something that we factor in as we work through the OBCs for each individual project as it comes forward, and we'll be factoring in any capital receipts that will be coming in and where we'll be looking to allocate those projects. Thanks.
Thanks. And Sarah?
Thank you, Tom. And this is something sort of high on my agenda in terms of that big strategic conversations with SG around the ability to roll reserves, the ability for us to borrow, etc. They're high-level discussions, and they will take time to progress. So in the meantime, absolutely, finance and estates will work closely together to monitor that picture. I think there's also an element around here around communication with government and forward planning. So combined with our risk appetite to build a cohesive plan that we're all aware of, that we are clear on what we are committing, multi-year commitments, because this estate replan is around multi-year commitments, and have that early communication with government such that both are aware of what we've committed ahead of time, ahead of that annual budgeting session, as well as those high-level conversations of what else can we do, particularly as I think capital SG government accounts were quite clear that there is going to be real, sorry, I'm searching for the right word. This is going to become under increasing financial pressures in the next couple of years. So it's something that is absolutely hot on the list.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Colleagues, if there's no other questions on the paper, we are asked to approve the uplift in budget to reflect the partial funding from Scottish Government for the pay award, 6.2 million. And there is a proposed breakdown of how that budget will be allocated across various areas in the appendix. Are people content to approve that budget change? Yes, okay, thanks very much. Talking about budgets, I thought it might be helpful just before we move on to give members an update on the work of the Budget Development Group. This is a joint group that's chaired by the chair of the SPA and has the chairs of Performance and Planning, People and Resources Committee as members, along with the Chief Executive, the Chief Constable, Director of Forensic Services and Senior Police and Finance staff. And this is where the detailed discussions are taking place around developing the draft budget proposals. Obviously, the authority is responsible for approving the budget for policing and advocating for funding for policing. So the Budget Development Group meets on a monthly basis and is there to provide more detailed insight into the proposals and the key messages for further discussion. It allows members to fully understand the impacts of the proposals and ultimately to take a view on the authority's advocacy for the police budgets. I'm going to propose that moving forward, I'll give a regular update to this committee on the work of the Budget Development Group. Recent meetings have focused on the Criminal Justice Committee written submissions to the Scottish Parliament, and the group have also recently considered the discussions and the submissions and focused on understanding the ask for additional officers and staff posts, as well as the challenges and the consequences of different budget scenarios, including flat cash scenarios. So if members are in agreement, I'll add a separate agenda item to future Resources Committee meetings so that we can have more regular updates on this important topic. Okie dokie, thanks very much. So that takes us on to item 4, and 4.1 is the Q1 transformation report and benefits update. And I think we're over to Breda.
Thanks, Chair. Hello, everyone. As many of you know, the revised oversight and benefits reports that's been submitted for this committee meeting, it's part of a broader piece of work that my team and I have been doing to really think about how can we transform how we manage change. To give you assurance, I thought it would be helpful to share in this forum just top level a little bit about the work that we've been doing, which underpins the revised papers that we've submitted with you. It also links, Chair, to the open action that you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. So fundamentally, there's 3 elements that we have been working on progressing. The first, as you know, is around prioritisation. So there's a lot of work going on to move that forward. The second piece of work is around structure, and the third piece of work is around benefits, and all of them are linked. And all of them are part of the pack that's in front of you today. In terms of the prioritisation, one thing to remember is that we have a really ambitious and quite exciting portfolio of work. We have 9 programmes. When you look at the detail in the papers, there's 30 projects that are within those 9 programmes, and additionally there's 8 standalone projects. So it's a big portfolio. And that's before we start looking at the numerous other initiatives that we've got that are pretty significant. So my team, led by Campbell and Conrad, who are here today, have been progressing work to prioritise and restructure our portfolio. The purpose of this is there's a few key elements. Predominantly, it's to improve our strategic alignment, to ensure that everything is aligned to Vision 2030. Also, it's to help us to ensure that we can truly deliver this. It's to give more visibility to yourselves and to ensure that we are better really at realising the benefits. So that's the importance of that work. It's helpful to say that we are making good progress and there is still work to be done. Today, Conrad and Campbell, they've developed a comprehensive list of all change activity, which we did not have before. They've clarified how everything aligns and supports delivery of the vision. Teresa has introduced a front door process, which I know we've talked about. We've run a number of those with Scott as the representative from the SPA on that, which have been going really well. The purpose of the front door is to prioritise new initiatives that are coming forward. Conrad and Campbell have developed this sort of revised portfolio structure, which we're starting to talk to people about. And for us, the key thing is for all new business improvements, we need to be better at identifying our resource that will support delivery of that. And we need to do that. We need to commit that resource before we're confirming that we're going ahead with things. So there's a lot of work in that territory that is helping us to move forward. A critical part of that is our resources within transformation. And as a result of that, you know that we've been doing work to look at the structure. Obviously, it's limited what I can say about that because it's subject to continued staff consultation at the moment. It's helpful to draw out that there are 2 key reasons that we're doing this structural change. The first is we need to expand change capability. You'll notice that often in the report, there are comments that we need additional business and implementation need support for projects. We just don't have enough. So part of the structure change is to increase our change capability and capacity so we can really effectively deliver the people side of change. That's the first element. The second element is as part of our restructure, our plan, if it's approved, is to have an initiation task force. This will be a flexible resource to support programmes or initiatives that come through the front door, because at the moment there are additional ideas that will make a really big, profound difference, and we do not have available resource to work on that. So the structure is part of our way, working alongside the work that Campbell and Conrad have done in prioritisation to enable us to deliver. The other part that we've been doing a lot of work on, and I know Chair Angela, we talked to you about this early in October, is we've been looking at benefits. We, clearly in the past have only looked at the quantitative benefits, which is only part of the picture. We are reviewing our approach to benefits in totality. Teresa and Campbell have been leading on this, and we are taking a systematic approach to benefits realisation. And again, we've made progress, and again, we've got quite a lot more to do. So to date, we have proposed, needs to be ratified, but we've proposed 7 categories of benefits. We have created a process for benefits identification and mapping, which Campbell has been running with the criminal justice community on the initiatives that they're progressing. We have also aligned all of our benefits to the pillars of the vision. So that's completed. More work's needed. Teresa's team are looking at redesigning PPMA, which is our database, our tool that we use, so that PPMA can monitor and report on these proposed 7 categories. That's critical to enable us to start effectively reporting on it for yourselves. We are proposing to incorporate a deep dive on benefits as part of our own project report, which we hope will be really supportive. We also need to create an integrated framework for benefits, which is the action that's open, which we are working on. And our hope is that, the sort of Teresa's intention, I should share, is to externally quality assure this framework, and then come back to yourselves in this committee to share it in more detail, which I think the next committee meeting is in March, and I hope we'll be to be in a position to share it with you in March. So thought that would be helpful to say that whilst the papers that we have submitted are a revision, we hope that, I really do hope that these revised papers give you more detail and the sort of detail that you need. I hope that the paper makes it easier for you to digest the information. It's probably helpful to realise that paper, it's not only because of the helpful feedback that you've given us, it's also because of all the other work that's been going on that we are continuing to revise that paper. If I just say a few things on the paper itself, which I hope has given you more information. So there is, as I said earlier, there are 9 programmes and there are 8 standalone projects. On page 3, there's a summary of the programmes. You'll see that 2 of those 9 programmes are reporting red overall. One of them's reporting amber, the other 6 are green. On pages 6 and 7, there is detail to support all of the programmes that are red and amber. The hope is in that information that it gives you clarity in terms of the position and also what's required to happen next in order to bring it back to green. You'll also see that there's an additional page, which is page 8, which gives an explanation of the programmes that have changed colour RAG status in the last period. And there are 3 programmes that have moved from amber to green, and page 8 gives an explanation of what's the rationale around why they have changed. So I'll come back to that in a minute. On page 9 to 11, there's information on the standalone projects, very similar. There's detail around the rationale around why programmes aren't green. The key thing to draw out is that the reasons why those programmes aren't green, they're all things really that are outside Police Scotland's control. So that's kind of the main thing in terms of those programmes. And as you see, a lot of them are legislation. What we thought would be helpful now in terms of, rather than regurgitating some of the information that's on that, on page 4 and 5, you'll see that we've written the detail at a project level, and most of the detail around why the projects are not green is covered in the subsequent pages. There's only 2 that are red that there is not detail to support it, and the reason there isn't is because they're on programmes that are overall green. So we thought it would be helpful. Those 2 are estate asset management and national ICS. So we thought it'd be helpful just to give you a few sentences to share the rationale around why those 2 are green. So I'm going to pass over to Campbell, who is responsible for estates asset management, and then I'm going to pass over to Andrew, our CGO for national ICS. So Campbell.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Campbell Moffat, one of the heads of portfolio delivery here in the transformation function. In terms of the estates asset management solution update, obviously appreciating that the report was written at a point in time. That project has subsequently returned to an amber as we are as of today. However, I am forecasting that a risk we have around scope creep is likely to materialise over the next period, and we're likely to raise an issue to address that fact, which in turn will probably arise to a change request at some point in the future. And that's relating to the requirement for, potentially a requirement for additional modules to support that delivery. So we're working with the SRO and the business area just now to understand exactly what that will mean in terms of a scope change, what modules are required to come forward. We'll then have to replan the impact of that and understand the timelines and cost. And so the bottom line is it has returned to amber, but in the future likely to go red again until we bring forward a change request to re-baseline it. But that's based on our understanding of the business requirements for additional modules in that space adding to scope.
Thanks, Campbell. So I'll now pass over to Andrew, who'll give you a bit of an update on national ICS.
Thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone. National ICS, as you know, is quite a complex technical programme. We are having ongoing issues with some of the technology, but we are, to be frank, battling through it hand in hand with C3. Obviously, we went into detail off table, but just to reassure members that much of the technical issues that we've had have now been overcome. Just due to the reporting cycle, we're currently still working through some of the paperwork around it, but some of the technical issues that I know Scott's aware of as well that we're working with him on have actually been overcome now. So we are now working about kind of moving to the next rollout, into the next area. So again, obviously happy to take the detail off table, but just to reassure everyone, some of the initial technical issues we had, we've worked with the supplier to resolve, and we've had no reoccurrence of those issues in the last few weeks. So we are now working with the business area about broader rollout now. So thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I thought it'd be nice to draw out one of the programmes that has moved from amber to green, which is forensic services. I know at the last resources committee meeting, there was a question around our support of that. Really positive story. So Fiona and Douglas and I spoke a number of times on this to ensure that things are moving forward in the right direction. And I know you know that there was a paper that was submitted to the last forensic services committee meeting, which Fiona and I sort of collaborated on. And I did want to, I know Donna Valance is on this call, I wanted to say particular thanks to Donna, our new sort of head of estates, that Donna has actively worked with myself and worked with Fiona to progress this. There were questions in terms of our ability to support the work, particularly with the long-term sustainable model for toxicology. Our support from that from an estates perspective. Obviously, with the estates transformation going on, we are thin in terms of resourcing, and Donna has given Fiona the assurance that we will support it. And personally, thanks to Donna, because she is attending the forensic services board meetings herself in order to provide that kind of connection and support. So as a result of that, everything is moving forward in the positive direction, really collaboratively on forensic services. Thought that would be helpful to share. So they were the kind of key things that I was wanting to share in terms of the portfolio of work. Just a little bit in terms of, and then I'm going to hand over to Teresa, a little bit in terms of the benefits. Again, we have actively worked at incorporating your feedback into the report. Hopefully it's more comprehensive because it's got a lot of qualitative information as well as quantitative information. I must say thanks to Conrad for, and I hope you enjoyed it, setting up the day in Tullyallen for yourselves on really giving you, I hope, and I enjoyed it, giving a good understanding of the difference that these programmes are making to frontline policing. So hopefully that's really supported. So again, you know, there's a lot of work that is going on into this territory of benefits, and we realise that we've got quite a bit of work still to do. Teresa will talk you through a little bit more detail of the revisions that we've made to the benefits pages.
Thanks, Rita. So members might have already seen that the benefits mapping slide refers to those 7 categories we're working on in that developing framework, which Rita mentioned. It's important to note that previous projects did not use those categories, so fundamentally that's us doing a bit of a look back in terms of that, and that's still a developing piece that we'll continue to work on, and again we'll refer to more detail about those categories when we provide the framework information to the committee in the new year. You'll also see that we've amended the slides on benefits realisation to capture year-by-year plan benefits as well as a confidence level RAG status, and actual realised benefits. That again kind of like follows feedback from yourselves and also the chair. We're also working in an outline which shows the baseline information from the business case and subsequent change requests. This remains work in progress, so that's work that we are also kind of completing as a result of your output. And as Breda mentioned, we're working on automating our benefits collation and reporting through our project management tool, PMA. That's a considerable undertaking. As of right now, benefits is a pretty manual process for us to report on, so it's something that we're really looking to streamline in future. We're also working on governance routes to provide a bit of a direct link to operational boards so that the benefits realisation is tracked throughout the life cycle of the project, not just kind of from an operational perspective, a handover. So that's something we're kind of looking to do as well. And we've had some really good conversations with operational boards on that, and an agreement that that's fundamentally the approach we're going to take. So that's just to give you a bit more of a flavour on the benefits outline, but happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there's anything else you want to cover off before.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks, Chair. So we are happy to hopefully to be able to answer any questions that you have for clarification.
Thanks very much, everybody. We really welcome the evolution of this paper and the update as to where you've got to and what's coming next. So I will open it up to members who I'm sure will have a few comments and questions too. Angela.
Thank you, and thanks everybody in the room. It was really interesting just to get that further update and hear some of the practical issues you're dealing with. Could I ask a couple of practical questions, and then I've got a more general one. On slide 6, there's a reference to the fraud strategy and operating model going to be delayed due to changes and are being advised by the City of London Police that there's going to be a delay. Could I just ask what the reason for that is, please? And the other one was the ISO 17025 being paused. And you know, I appreciate that you already mentioned, Breda, the importance of prioritisation. But I think this is something that between Forensic Services and Police Scotland, it's obviously been subject to discussion for a long time now. And I suppose I was just surprised to see that, given earlier in the year there was a seminar between Forensic Services and Digital Forensics where this really featured as one of the key things to make sure that the standards across the two different areas were compatible and at a similar level. So those are my two general questions, Pauline. I don't know if you want me to ask my third question, which is a bit more specific.
we can hold that till we've got responses to those two specific ones. Thanks.
I think I'm going to answer both of those questions. Thank you, Angela. Conrad Trickett, for those who don't know me, I'm Chief Superintendent in the transformation function. Nice to be here this morning. Many of you will know that I used to be the business lead in the Policing the Digital World programme as well a couple of years ago. So these are both subjects close to my heart. Obviously, we've now set up our fraud and cyber unit within Police Scotland, which Detective Chief Super Andy Patrick is responsible for and leading on. And I know that he's recently been to Forensic Services Committee around the ISO issue that you referred to, Angela. So I'll try and dovetail in with the update he provided there at the end of October. Just on the first question around the report fraud that is being known for City of London Police. So they're acting on behalf of the whole of UK policing through their role as the lead for National Police Chiefs Council on fraud and cyber. They've got a really extensive programme of work to replace the old action fraud model with the report fraud model. It is a complicated programme that they themselves have had challenges in delivering, and we have seen at least 2 slippages right from their piece of work since our involvement back in 2023. The strategic appetite is still to join report fraud, to join up the UK for the first time ever in terms of fraud and cyber. But it's always been an understanding that we're likely to go live around about 12 months after it's gone live in England and Wales. That's always been the sort of underlying assumption. And that's because of some of the technology that we need to put in place for our own operating models. And that's because of the Scottish Crime Recording Standards. And we're working closely with SCRS board around changing to different recording practices, and indeed the timeline of when we could do that, because obviously it needs to be aligned to the counting year from their perspective. So there's a number of reasons why there's always been an assumption around it being 12 months after they go live in the rest of the UK. And that's still what we're planning to. So ultimately we are dictated to by where City of London Police are, where their go live is. They are working as we speak at the moment to try and do a soft launch of the system. And so in early new year, we should get confirmation that they're happy with where they are with their go live. And then we'll be able to engage actively around when we might be able to follow around about 12 months later. So hopefully that answers that question, Angela. In terms of 17025, one of the things that Policing in the Digital World has always called out is the ever-increasing demand on digital forensics as a function, but because of the ever-increasing use of digital evidence in criminality and therefore in our investigations. And so what has happened over the last 12 months is that the demand has outstripped the current resource and importantly the processes that we are following in relation to producing digital evidence in court. So there has had to be a real focus on priorities of investigation in the digital forensics lab. That's then obviously created that balance between capacity and workload and where we focus. And in order for us to successfully achieve accreditation, clearly the staff in the lab play a massively important part in that. And quite simply, we've had to focus on the day job as opposed to the additional ask that accreditation would bring. There are also some specific barriers in relation to resourcing, which I know I personally have reported back to Forensic Services Committee previously, and those haven't yet been resolved within the organisation. But I think more importantly, we're taking this as a bit of a foot on the ball moment. So Andy has come into the role, fresh pair of eyes, a new cyber and fraud unit, and looked at how we deal with digital evidence holistically across the organisation. And we actually need to work with both the fiscal service and across the organisation to change the way that we deal with digital evidence. So it can't all just go to the lab because we will never ever get out of that that downward spiral. So we have to think differently around this. Part of that then requires a digital management solution so that we can share digital forensics, mobile phone extraction information widely across the organisation, refreshing our capability around digital forensics at the front line, and trying to automate as many of the lab processes as possible. So Andy has created a really strong vision for the future that he's currently working with the organisation to take forward. It talks about a 3-tier model. So our frontline investigators both want to have more control around the evidence they're submitting and also be able to extract. So being able to give them both the skills and capability to do that. And then having divisional specialists that can provide that extra layer of support and advice in terms of the slightly more complicated investigations. And then tier 3 being the digital forensic labs, as we currently know them, dealing with the top end of complexity or severity in terms of digital forensic work. And that's the vision and the model that we need to move towards. In terms of how ISO compliance ties into that, although we're talking about pausing the project from a project management point of view, you'll know that we've got quality assurance manager and 2 quality assurance officers that are embedded within digital forensics and within the cyber and fraud unit, and they will continue to develop the approach so that any new process we put in place is aligned to ISO compliance. So at some point we'll be able to come back to you and actually talk. Once we've got that vision and the detail under that in place, we'll be able to then describe how ISO compliance fits in with that. So it's not a lost aspiration, it's a foot on the ball. The world is moving fast in this space and we need to just rethink how we tackle it and then come back with that ISO compliance. I do always reflect on the Director of Forensic Services said it took wet forensics 20 years to get ISO compliance in place. So we're still, I think, doing okay in terms of working through the challenges that piece of work creates. Hopefully that helps, Angela, in terms of answering those 2 questions.
Well, I mean, I see that there's a full paper coming to the Resources Committee in December. From your report, so I think we can maybe pick that up there. There's quite a lot in that, Conrad, that I'm sure between forensics and resources we'd want to pick up on, but thank you for that full explanation. Can I just go back though to the fraud strategy operating model? So what I'm hearing is that we're on target as far as the responsibilities and the changes that we need to make within Police Scotland. Those are all on target to allow us to come in on schedule within the extended 12-month period that you talked about.
So there's a little bit chicken and egg, Angela, in terms of the focus for City of London Police rightly is their rollout in England and Wales at this point of time. And we can go so far with what our operating model will look like. But of course, a lot of that requires information from City of London Police, which they're not able to give us the time to give us the detail we currently need because their focus is on the rollout in England and Wales, which is why they've always said they need extra time afterwards so that they can then dedicate time to us to give us all the information we need in order for us to deliver that. So it's a partial yes. In terms of things that are in our control, we're actively trying to put in place. So, for example, how will we nationally coordinate that information coming in from a single portal and coordinate fraud nationally to improve our response to it? So there's things we can do organisationally in that space that Andy is actively progressing. There is a little bit that we have to wait until they can give us time and capacity for us to actually understand some of the detail behind some of the moving parts before we can put those in place. So I wouldn't want you to think that there's a button that can be pressed and we're ready to roll. There's a little bit of we need that time to work with them to really understand some of the detailed dynamics. But we're doing as much as we can based on that scenario, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Thanks. That's really helpful. Pauline, I'll just go on to my other question. So it's really more in terms of presentation and the accuracy of the information that the committee's receiving. I don't mean it's not accurate, it's accurate at this point in time, but if we look at the RAG status of quite a few of the programmes that you mentioned, Breda, they show that they're green. But over the lifetime of the committee, we've seen various change requests coming in that have subsequently changed, you know, costs, timescales, and benefits. So I'm just, and there's one that particularly, you know, brought this to mind, that's in the paper about the age of criminal responsibility, and once that change request, which we'll consider later, once that change request is considered, this project will return to green. But the reality is, it's not meeting the timescale, it's not probably meeting the cost and so on that we identified in the full business case. So I'm just wondering how we get that transparency between the approval of the full business case on the basis of timescale, cost and benefits in particular, and then the subsequent changes, particularly given that many of the projects span several years.
I'll say a couple of sentences and I'll pass over to Teresa for a bit more detail. So firstly, Angela, I really understand your comment, and it's something that we've talked about quite a lot since I joined. And I know, Chair Angela, in the conversation that we had in October, one of the things that we talked about was, which we are working on, I'll pass over to Teresa for, was some sort of documentation for yourselves in terms of what was the original business case position, you know, what are the different change requests and how have they impacted, whether it's timeframes or costs. And that is work ongoing that we will pull together, because I do understand wanting the bigger picture. The reality is, in terms of how things are reported, the fact that there is a change request that has, you're quite right, moved things back to green means that the programme, once the change request is approved, from a schedule or a risk or a cost point of view, does go back to green. The question is, for me, it's more around, I suppose, the nature of and the number of change requests that we have, which I'll pass over to Teresa for.
Yeah, so I mentioned when I was speaking about benefits that we've looked at kind of working from the business case baseline and change requests through it. So we started to do that work in terms of the benefits work, but I've also asked my team to look at it across the entirety, so that we can provide some trend analysis and looking at just the volume of change requests, trying to analyse essentially a bit of reasoning essentially behind some of the change requests, and also some trending in terms of particular problem areas that do cause repeat change requests. So we are doing some of that work. We're also looking, as we mentioned already, in terms of kind of the templates that we use, including the business case templates and the submissions that we use. We've been working on potentially looking at a resubmission of business cases on a yearly basis, aligned with financial projections. Now that's still in its kind of infancy, and we're looking at what impact that would make to things, but that potentially might provide us with a more controlled view of the portfolio overall. But we're doing a lot of work to kind of look at those things generally. But as I've said, that's part of what my team are doing in terms of looking at the volume of change requests against the baseline information and trying to build up that story of where each project went across the board. I also had a conversation with Scott about looking at the change request process. At the moment, the change request process, again, is a pretty manual process that we go through. I think there's a lot that we could do to improve it in line with the investment governance framework, or updating the investment governance framework, and working alongside Scott and your officials to review that.
Thank you. Thanks both. I suppose for us, it's really just important that we see how far away we are from the approval of the original business case, full business case, and whether or not we think that the work still provides best value. So that's the bit of oversight that I think the committee members would be interested in seeing. But thanks, Pauline.
Yeah, I really understand that, and that is something that we are in progress to provide, which is completely fair. Thanks, Angela.
So thanks everyone. So in terms of that kind of end to end from full business case to where we are now, kind of tracking the kind of changes in terms of benefits, cost, timescales, along with the kind of revised prioritisation framework, are you expecting that you'll bring that back to the March meeting, Breda?
That is our hope. I mean, I'm kind of looking at Teresa. That's what we are aiming to do. There's a lot of work. I mean, honestly, to that needs to go into that. And I can say that we will, at the very least, give you an update on progress in March, and we can liaise and connect and share between now and then in terms of progress.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation and the report, which is a great advancement in everywhere, so I appreciate that. I'm conscious that we'll be talking about estates in more detail in private session, but as this is a public session, I've got a general point I'd like to explore. Recent commentary on estates and particularly station closures, etc. So my question is as much to the professional leads and the operational leads here. Are we content with the estates master plan, that the coherent messaging externally and internally is where it needs to be?
Donna, I wonder if that's something that you could respond to.
Yeah, I think that it could be more explicit in how we message it. Currently, it's on the website, and the master plan is within the website, and we refer to what we're doing in any press release response. We say this is in line with our master plan now. I checked on this last night actually, because I was going through what's online and what the public have got access to, but you do have to go and look for it. And I think in response to what you're saying, Tom, perhaps the best solution would be a much more explicit statement around about, rather than the response that journalists pick up on the FOI responses, which ask how many buildings have been closed, and then they report number of buildings as though that's the number of stations, and that's not an accurate representation of the facts. I think what we've done internally within the Estates Department, and this will start to come forward in the 30th of the month, we'll put a list of all of the buildings that's been closed and the function that was carried out within them. So it's explicit, whether it's been a station, whether it's been a store, whether it's been dog kennels, and rather than everything being conglomerated together and then reported as though these are all police stations that's closing and there's no replacement, when we are in line with the master plan right-sizing the estate along with every other public sector estate just now. But what there's a wee bit of ambiguity, I think, around about how that's been reported back.
Thanks, Donna, and so I accept all that and understand the intentions of this master plan, etc. It's how do we take confidence that a correct consultation with local communities is taking place before these decisions are made?
Not sure I'm the best person to speak to this, but there is a full consultation pack around it, and there is actually, I'm not sure if it sits within Breda, within your area on consultation, or it might be within one of my areas within estates, but there's a full consultation process and pack, and it's a checklist process that goes through before any decision is taken on whether or not a station should be closed and what the alternative solution is as a replacement for that.
Thanks very much. I mean, I totally accept that probably the answer lies within the local policing division, etc. But perhaps we could, rather than the points been made about the overall coherence of the messaging, the comms. Perhaps we could have a specific paper on this at a future date. That would be helpful. Thanks for that, Donna.
Thanks, Tom. Alistair?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just building on a couple of the themes. Many of the questions that I had were actually answered when the team actually spoke through the paper, and I do recognise significant progress that is being made in the way that the information on the transformation is being presented to us. I mean, ultimately, what we are seeking to do is be in a position to make a full assessment of the effectiveness and the efficiency of programme delivery. And I think everything you've spoken about will aid that. And I would particularly endorse the comments that Angela has made on movement from the initial business case through change requests and recognising where we are. There's a couple of programmes that are flagged up as red. Data Drives Digital and Policing in a Digital World programme. And then on page 6, you give us explanations around that and indicate that there's going to be further change requests coming in on these, I think, in the early part of next year. So my request would really be is that we see any change requests that are coming as early as possible, and that those change requests, detail out for us what any overspend, any slippage, any movement away from the benefits that were outlined in the business case, because that would help us to as you progress the reporting, I think that would help us significantly in terms of assessing the effectiveness of programme delivery.
I think the big thing that I'm taking away, which, as I said, Teresa and I are working on, is reviewing the change request process, and Alice, as you're saying, making it far more explicit so that you can quite rightly do the role that you've got in terms of governance. And I know as you read through the programmes, particularly those that are red, there's a lot of sentences about change request. So I'm really conscious of that. I'm also conscious, Alice, you were saying to have them in a timely manner. I realise now, if I look at Dan, and if I'm honest with yourselves in terms of the information, some of the change requests should have been submitted before. So I suppose I just ask for your patience, to be honest, as Teresa and I work diligently to raise change requests and to ensure that the governance is in place. And some of that is looking back retrospectively, and Teresa's done an amazing job of identifying certain ones where we should have raised a change request quite a while ago. So we are working hard to put those in place. And Angela, linking to your comment, we're also really thoughtful about how can we present this to yourselves so that you do have the clarity in terms of this is the original business case, and how far away from that have we moved, and Chair, your comment, so that we can make a call about, is this still the right decision to be moving forward with that? So we're all aligned that we need that. It will take us a wee while to get there, and we are honestly, we're working hard on that.
Thanks very much. If there's no other points on this, just one follow-on question from myself. Campbell, you mentioned the estates asset management delay. I think this is probably a question more for Donna. What impact is that delay having on the implementation of the estates master plan?
It currently means, Chair, that we're having to work from Excel spreadsheets and historic data sources, and where it's delayed the move towards a golden source.
So is it essentially much more resource intensive then?
Yes, absolutely. And we don't have that one defined gold source. So what we're trying to do is, in the interim, whilst we work out what's happening in terms of the additional modules, we are just looking at what data is requested most frequently and trying to update those areas just now so that we can respond to things like the FOI requests that come through, so that we're giving them real-time information as response.
Okay, and do we have any idea as to when we might get this back on track?
I literally popped off this call to go and ask where we were at with it. There's conversations ongoing from today as well, just to try and get it back on track. It's literally hot off the press.
Okay, thanks. So maybe we can get an update on that next time we meet in December. Thanks for that. Colleagues, many thanks. As we said, very much welcome the evolution of this work and the presentation of the report. and it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge all the benefits and the work of the portfolio that's celebrated from slide 20 onwards in the report. So many thanks, and we got a flavour of some of those benefits when you came along to present to the board seminar a few weeks ago. So we greatly appreciate the work, and that's why it's so important that it continues, and with even a greater pace, given the tremendous opportunities but challenges going forward. So many thanks, everybody. Moving on then to item 5, and this is the work plan. I'm sure, given the conversation we've just had and all the work that's apparent in terms of estates, that people will be able to update the Secretariat in terms of what's likely to be coming at future meetings. So if you could please do that, that would be helpful just in terms of managing the agendas and diary management and time management going forward, please. Thank you very much. So with that, it takes us to the end of our public meeting. We'll just pause for a moment before we then move in.